heads up that we chat a little bit about AI in this episode in a way that isn't totally anti-AI. So if you're not in the mood for that, you might like to check out this episode at a different time.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Jill Araya.
And I'm Sarah Beth Goer.
Welcome to the Crafting Audiobooks podcast, where we discuss the art and craft of audiobooks, and we aim to go deep quick.
Hi, everyone. I'm extra super duper excited today because we are here with narrator and coach Megan Tusing. And Megan is not only a very well-respected narrator with 400-something books to her name, and she's a 3-time Audie nominee, but she's also one of my best friends in the whole wide world. So I'm very excited that I get to be here with her and Jennifer today. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored and excited and have been a fan of your podcast since its inception. I remember Sarah and I having a conversation about it, and then Jennifer being on board, and it was just like this beautiful birth of something that was needed in our industry, and I know it means a lot to a lot of people. So I'm so excited and honored to be a guest.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to dive in. I'm super excited to hear your answers to these questions that we've designed over the year, or I don't know how long we've been doing this. Anyway.
I think it's
Megan.
years at this point.
Yeah. Megan, when you are narrating, can you describe where and how you're focusing? For example, are you aware of your body or the world in your head? Does your focus shift depending on whether it's dialogue or narration?
Yes.
What's your experience?
Okay. So I don't know. I don't presently think about that. It just sort of happens. But I guess when I'm narrating, so physically where my body is, I sit when I narrate, and I have a monitor where my audio recording software is happening, but then I read off of an iPad. So my eyes are just focused on the story. I think that's important for me. If I'm watching the WAV file go, I get too distracted and caught up in the technicality of things. So that's where my physical form is facing forward instead of forward toward my iPad. And as far as where I am internally, I guess it depends on who's speaking and where the point of view is from. And I'm just trying to be most present in what's happening with that character. A thing that's been really fun is when you're narrating, you can look ahead, but probably not more than 1 or 2 lines. So it's a physical restriction, but it's also a gift because then you have to stay present in the moment of what's happening. You can't go beyond that. But you also have to have the ability to take that sentence that you're reading or pre-reading the next sentence and know what emotion that you need to, or inflection, or it can be it's a bit of technique of inflection, but then it's also genuine emotion of what's happening in that story. Like if it's a mystery thriller and you see the line, "She noticed that the door was open." You can read that a bunch of different ways, but I love if you're in the moment and you're present and it's a tense moment, it can be something like you can infuse the curiosity into that line of, "She noticed that the door was open." And that's something that's taken time and I've learned from other people and heard other narrators do. But that's been the fun part, is when I'm in the moment, I'm trying to feel what that character is feeling and layering when I'm narrating that where that person is with communicating also the actual words. And as far as how it's different with narrative versus dialogue, I guess narrative's more internal. So it's sometimes more vulnerable. And with dialogue, there's always subtext. And there is I wanted to quote Marnie Penning from I'll probably quote it incorrectly, but from Your All's podcast, when she talked about her voice as an instrument and thinking of the different registers. I heard that and I loved it and I use it now. And when I'm playing different characters, I think about what note on my instrument do they show up and kind of clock them there. And so I remember them within my body when they show up. I'm like, oh, right, this is the detective. He's like down in my chest, and then thinking of just where that note shows up. So does that answer the question?
It
Yes?
absolutely does. Yes.
Okay.
Yes
Yeah.
would be the answer to that.
Okay.
I love your visual focus because, we ask similar questions sometimes to different guests. And I think you're the first guest who has ever responded to this question talking about where your visual focus is. And I think that's something that's really powerful because as narrators, we aren't memorizing our scripts the way that we would if we were in film or on stage. So where our visual focus is truly does matter to our ability to be able to communicate the text. I remember I was a baby narrator, and I was having a conversation with Eric Sinistvedt, who is an engineer and proofer that I work with regularly, about how to reduce my pickups. And one of the things that he suggested, and he said he just suggests it to relatively new narrators, but that can be really helpful, is to take a pencil that's got a nice big eraser on the end, and with that pencil eraser, follow along with the script on your tablet or computer screen. And the idea behind the pencil eraser being big is that the eraser can touch the tablet and it's not going to make noise. So like you can physically follow along with that pencil eraser, the script, and it helps you stay in the moment. When your visual focus is really with the word you're actually saying at that exact instance in time, that your emotional focus can stay there too. And that's really powerful.
My mom was a special ed teacher, and I was in special ed for a reading disability and also in the gifted program at the same time. And I remember my mom teaching me that in order to read for accuracy. She would say, just follow along with your finger or a pencil. And I think there's also an app that was introduced that I've tried called Beeline, if anybody knows that. It changes the color. It does like a color gradient on your text so that your eyes will follow the text a little bit better because it changes color as you're going across the line, which is really, some people have raved about it for accuracy, but also I think for presence.
Absolutely. And I had never thought about what you said, that it's a gift that we can't, read past the line because it forces us to be in the present moment, because we all have been taught or talk about that in the acting craft itself. Like, okay, be in the present moment, but how do you do that? And in the craft of narration, focusing on where you are visually. Like, I had never thought about it that way.
And I'll say I was having dinner with the lovely Carly Robbins earlier this week, and Carly had come in with me on one of my coaching sessions with one of my clients, and we were talking about because we were specifically focusing on some romance things. And Carly gave this great advice, and I'm going to misquote it, but the essence of it was, you have to stay present from line to line when you're with each character. So it's like that same essence of what we're talking about. Like, I've gathered pieces from friends, from colleagues, from other coaches to help me remember that in that moment. From special ed teachers, you just don't even know what an accident could turn into a gift.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The idea of staying present with each character in each line also makes me think of, in a lot of scenes, the characters that are having a conversation will be having very different emotional arcs. And when you're staying truly present in each dialogue line as you're going from one character to another, it can help you maintain the different through lines. So say it's a conversation between a man and a woman. The woman is frustrated and hurt, and the man is angry. There's different emotional through lines for those two emotional arcs. And staying truly present in each line, rather than thinking about the line that's coming, can help you maintain two different emotional arcs. Again, a difference between audiobooks as acting versus stage and film as acting is that we are responsible for all of the emotional arcs, not just a single character. Presence matters. Ooh.
It does.
Yeah.
It's
And
exciting and terrifying. Yes, sorry.
No. I just think there's no way to do it other than to learn to trust our bodies and our instincts. Because there's not time to think consciously, I'm shifting points of view now. It's something that like builds up in the narrator's craft over time is this like instinctual shift from one POV to the other. And I like what you said too about the intimacy of the narration, that it can almost, like, obviously it would depend on the dialogue. Maybe there's a dialogue scene where the character is feeling very vulnerable, but that there's a vulnerability to it. I hadn't ever heard the difference explicitly described that way, and I think that's a really great way to connect to it.
Yeah, because I've been told, like, you have to make dialogue pop differently than narrative, and I can do that with my voice technique. But how do I find that how do I make it make sense as an actor? Like, how is
Exactly,
that
connect more deeply,
Right.
and not just
How can
do
I
this
make
surface level thing.
Right. How can I make it actionable and authentic to me? And so if it's that same scene of the woman with the door being open and she doesn't know who's behind it, it's like she's allowed to show maybe more fear in that moment than she would if once she finds the person who's there. Or maybe she's going after the person behind the door. You never know. But yeah, there's a different kind of truth that we show. That's why people like books, right? You get to hear all the inner dialogue and all the juicy things that you don't usually get to see. You see it on someone's face in film and you read it in body language, but when you get to hear all the juicy bits inside, you really get a very different understanding of who somebody is. And that's fun to play with too.
Oh my God, I love that. I've never thought of, I mean, like, I've, subconsciously thought of this, but like I've never articulated it as beautifully as you just did. And now I'm all excited.
Well, like you think of somebody who always presents as this really kind person, but they're going through this rebellion within where they just really want to rip that person apart in front of them, that they have to be so nice to. And that's like the journey that character's going on. And you get to play with all those daggerly smiles in your narrative. And then you get to blend it from the narrative into the dialogue as that character finally grows into whatever they're becoming, right? That's the whole fun about the journey of the book is they don't end up where they start. And you get to, where they're ending, but the listener doesn't. So how do you weave it through is the fun part.
Yes, it absolutely is. Ah, such good stuff. Well, Megan, I would love to know from you if there's something specific that you've learned about the craft of audiobooks over time or at a specific point that really has a big impact to how you do your work day to day now.
Yes, I don't know that it's specific to audiobooks. It's kind of a thing I started noticing because of audiobooks and then have taken it elsewhere into my life. And that is a mindset shift in how I speak to myself. I am a recovering perfectionist. I'm someone who I really don't like making mistakes. I really, really hate it. I don't know anybody who does, but I'm particularly sensitive to being told I've done something wrong. So when I'm in the booth by myself for hours and make a mistake, I was very, very mean to myself when I first started. I would also re-record lines to an unhealthy amount. Books would take me forever. And the funny thing is the first way I said it was probably the best. And then I would just like run it into the ground. Sort of like when I remember when I was in theater, like playwrights would just get so much feedback, the story would start to lose itself because they'd over edit it. That happens everywhere. So I was over editing myself that I would just like wasn't allowing myself to have any fun. I was just so mean. So through some work with coaches and therapists and recognizing this happening, I started changing the way I was talking to myself when I made a mistake. And I make a mistake frequently, like every 30 to 60 seconds, if not more. So imagine saying something really nasty to yourself every 30 to 60 seconds for 5 to 6 hours a day. It's so unhealthy. So, but I wasn't making that many mistakes throughout my life. And then I'm sitting in the booth and it's actively happening. So I started saying, and I do it now. I just did it before I was recording before I saw you. I make a mistake and I go, it's okay. We'll just try again. Or it's okay. You got this is when I commonly say, and I can feel it physically in my body how that shifts. It's like speaking to a little inner part of me saying like, all right, buddy, it's all right. We can say it wrong. You learn from mistakes. Success cannot happen without failure. Like the greatest inventions that have ever been made did not just birth themselves the first time. And also I have learned, because I've been kinder to myself, I don't hold on so tightly if I don't say something absolutely perfectly. Meaning, and not just perfectly diction-wise, but I mean like, yes, I probably could have said that line more eloquently or with more drama, but sometimes it's just good enough, because if it's a 10-hour book and I'm on a deadline, I can't be, like you were saying earlier, Sarah, we don't have time to be precious. You know, when we're in a rehearsal room for a play, we get to go over and rehearse it for weeks. We get to be on stage multiple times a night for weeks and say it different ways and explore. And that's the fun of that type of medium. But with this, it's like we got to make a choice and we got to keep going. And having to find the line between when is it really okay to just let it be good enough, and when is it like, no, I think this would make a very big difference to the storytelling if I go back and just say it a different way. That's been the one thing that's been a really big impact for me, is being kinder, talking to myself like I would talk to a dear friend in front of me. I would never say the things that I said to myself to either of you. And so changing the way I speak makes it easier to show up in the booth and has made me able to technically increase my workflow because I'm not hanging on to things. But it took a long time to get there.
That makes so much sense. That okay, so if our job requires self-trust so that we can really just connect and go with our instinct and know we're enough, that self-trust would start with self-kindness. How do you trust yourself if you're so cruel to yourself? Do you have any advice? Like if somebody's listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I just realized I'm really mean to myself in the booth too. You know, you mentioned coaches and therapists, but like, do you have any like if you were, you know, metaphorically like taking their hands and looking at them and giving them like a little seedling that they can then go sprout into a plant of how they grow this self-kindness?
I'm going to take an idea. I think it was Alex Picard who told me this. I think they took a picture of their younger self. Maybe it was a friend of theirs. They took a picture of their self as a kid and posted it in their booth so that every time they said something mean, they said it to that person. Or if you have a child in your life, I have a adorable little niece, I would never say anything like that to her. So I talk to my inner self. I have a little image of her there. I also like just put my hand on my heart. I don't know where it's a very internal or a physical feeling. So often when I'm feeling disconnected from the material or too caught up in judging myself, I will put my hand on my heart because it recenters me and it grounds me. Or I'll pause and I'll say, why are we rushing and who are we thinking is judging us? No one else is in this booth but you. I talk to myself out loud a lot. It's embarrassing, but I do. I'm a verbal processor.
That was going to be one of my questions is, do you actually say this out loud or
yes,
is this internal
I say
monologue?
it all out loud.
Okay.
I am not I am like, sometimes I wonder, my neighbors upstairs, they're like, she's home alone and she's talking out loud all the time. And I'm like, yes, I just have a lot of phone calls. No, it's just me talking to myself. So like I literally will, like if I'm having a really hard time, I will pause. I will take 3 deep breaths. I will have a conversation with myself of why I'm freaking out. And usually it's like I'm mad that I can't get a sentence or I just can't connect or I am on a deadline and I'm just like, you just have to keep going. But there's also this, I think it's the Navy SEALs say, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So I'll say that to myself of like, actually, if you take the time to take a moment and just see what the word is. Bob Sauer also told me, because he and I will meet together and like read for one another back and forth just to practice our craft once a month. And one time Bob was like, just stop, read the sentence slowly, then read it a little bit faster, and then pick it back up. And it was like, right, because I'll try to say the sentence 4 times too fast. And it's like, well, you just took the same amount of time. So give yourself permission to take time to pause, check in with what's going on. Do you need to keep going? Do you need to get out of the booth and go for a walk? Are you hungry? Are you tired? Like things you would kind of ask a kid, like what's going on with you, little guy? And really be present and hold space for yourself in that way.
Oh, I wish everybody would ask that of kids. Then we wouldn't be having these challenges when we were adults. Our sweet little nervous systems need lots of care, and that doesn't change when we're grown-ups. And
No.
this is such a beautiful uh, reminder and such a cool opportunity to see, like, look, like, even if you only care about the impact on the impact on the work needs you to nurture yourself in order to nurture the work. So it can be like a call to self-care.
Yeah, because I think the listener can hear when you're in your own way. They can hear that there's a block between the connection of them and you. And it's a disservice to both of you if you don't allow yourself the permission to step away, to pause, and to be okay with, like, it's okay to be vulnerable. Nobody's good at their job 100% of the time. You will not say every line in the book perfectly. Like, allow it to be okay. The thing that matters is that you're pulling them along, telling them the story, and keeping them engaged. Keeping the why, I think, will pull the rest of it through.
For sure. I mean, over the period of an 8-hour book, 10-hour book, 12-hour book, if one line is not quote unquote perfect, which, what is perfection? This is a subjective craft, but over the course of a full book, if one line isn't perfect, that's not going to ruin the listener's experience.
Also, accents. Like, I wish I had the talent that some people can just magically hear something and there they go. It takes me a lot of practice, and I do subtle. Subtle's good. I don't need to go hard on it, but that's another thing that I'm like, maybe my French accent isn't going to be that great, but it doesn't matter if I'm doing the essence, if I'm doing a flavor, if I'm present with the character and not how they sound, then I also ease up on that critic, right? Like, I did a book recently that had one of the minor characters was French, and I was like, oh my gosh, this doesn't sound right. And I was wasting so much time worrying about it. And I was like, the listener doesn't care that much. And if they do, they're not for you. If they really need someone with an accurate French accent, they can go listen to a French book or someone who is actually French. But I am like, I think I heard this once of like, they have to know I'm just one person. And my job is to tell the story as authentically and engagingly as possible for you. So if you can, as the listener, be a little forgiving that maybe this isn't quite accurate, but it's listenable enough, because what the character is saying and feeling matters more than the accuracies. I mean, I know some people will argue with that, but I won't be able to get through my day if I'm honing in on the vowel sounds. There's like work and preparation I can do, outside of the booth before the book to try to make it sound as well as possible. But then once you're in the book, you're in there recording, you have to let certain things be good enough. And also, like, even native speakers don't always say the same vowels the same way because we're humans and we say things differently. And you may have lived in one place or another place, and like we're all a mishmash. So,
yeah, that connection is the priority over anything else. And to me, that's something I love about the medium of audiobooks, and it's actually why I tend to prefer. Like, multicast can be very special for their own reasons. And I love solo narration because of the intimacy of one person, like, connecting with me and sharing this story with me, that there's like a flavor of delight if their French accent isn't perfect, that like I didn't want a different narrator to come in and nail the French accent for me. I wanted that connection and that like container of the story and the world, like the special, like we're in the special little world together.
Absolutely. And a character is more than an accent. Like, if all you're doing for character voices is changing pitch, or if all you're doing for character voices is adding an accent, that's not true to who that character is as a person, as a human being. Sure, in sci-fi, maybe it's not actually a human, but like as a character, that's not true to who the character is, because every character, no matter what the genre is or what the book is, every character is going to be more than a pitch, and every character is going to be more than an accent. I hear a lot of people talk about character voicing, and it's like, well, just change your pitch. And it's like, no, there's so much more. And the connection to, even if you're not changing the accent at all, or not changing the, pitch range at all, what matters in differentiating character voices most important is the emotional connection.
And there's also, I think, celebrities or actors who are not like career audiobook narrators sometimes get away with not having to do character voices, because that's another thing is stylistically the genre or the medium has evolved in different ways. And like now at this time, it's very in for us to do voices for every single character. But some books that I've listened to, the narrator, because they're not a career narrator, so they don't know this is how we do it, they just do a character. They just do the essence and the energy of the other person. And I kind of love that sometimes, because it's like they're just telling the story and being as present as possible, but I don't have any trouble following who's speaking. They do a slightly different vibe, but they don't go and change the whole character's voice. And I think there's something to be learned from that. And we don't want to get so caught up in what is trendy in the moment or what so-and-so has told us we should do. It's like what's really feeling the best in our bodies and what's really best that it's not distracting from the story.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think different books need different things too, which is, we're not obviously talking with a producer today, but that's something that comes up a lot in our conversations with casting professionals, is that when they make the selections of who they're going to audition for a project, part of what they're going to be considering is what style does this book need? I mean, there are some books that I've listened to that the characters do really need those extreme differentiations in vocal quality because that's the style that the writing is asking for. But then there are also those books that really just need a beautiful story well told. And the vocal the vocal acrobatics for those character voices would distract the listener rather than being a help in that story. So it varies a lot.
Yeah,
Although,
that's the
oh, you go, Megan.
I was just saying that's the fun part about this medium is it's there's no one way fits all.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say that, like, I actually would argue that because I was literally just on the last podcast we just recorded with Jonathan Pennock. I was talking about Carrie Mulligan's reading of The Midnight Library, which is one of my favorite. Like, it's just a very striking narration to me. She's one of my favorite actresses, and she is a celebrity who doesn't really do the character voices. And actually, sometimes I occasionally can't tell who's talking until the dialogue tag comes, but it didn't matter because the story was so beautifully told and connected. But I think I would maintain, while I completely agree that some books like are calling for that character differentiation and some need it's calling for that subtlety, I am still always in my heart drawn towards the great narrators, the career narrators who can do both, because I think that even the books that are calling for that subtleness and nuance, there are subtle, nuanced ways to differentiate voices too. And I think that's like, wow, like now we're at like the top of like the best of the craft here. But I agree, it's not required to get across the heart of what that story needs to be. But like, ooh, it's like, in the same way that like most film actors aren't the top film actors in the world, but there are some who are, and it's magnificent. But the ones who aren't still, most of the ones who aren't still help create a beautiful story. I'm sorry, there are some film actors that I'm like, how do you have a career? But most range from excellent to phenomenal,
Yeah, you have to have like the sprinkling of there are always going to be people who are going to excel and shine, but then there are also the worker ants. We're out there, we're doing the stuff, we are doing what the big greats are doing, but we're also, I think we're laying the foundation for them to know what to play with, or they're giving us, it's a give and take. It's a little bit like, you're learning from people behind and before you, and always applying different things if you want to stay in a place of greatness and consistent work, right? Both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of, that's a perfect lead into our next question, which is, Megan, what is one element of the craft of narration that you are really working on deeply right now?
So this is a recent development. Earlier in the year, or I guess I should say this happened last summer, I had the horrific construction on both sides of me. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to like figure out how to go in studio. And I live in New York City, so I have the privilege of sometimes being able to go in studio, but mostly I record from home. However, I was forced to have to go into studio due to construction. And the gift that gave me was that I was working with another set of ears. And I realized, like, I actually prefer to record from home because I'm a little creature of comfort. But it was good for me to get out of my comfort zone because it helped me shake up my craft. And what I learned from that is it's probably good for me to hire an engineer once a month to just be present with me and remind me of what's going on. And one of the sessions that I had, I was working on a particularly dense nonfiction. And you know, sometimes you just lean back on your technical skills to get through a book that is hard like that. And I noticed it, and I was like, I think I'm falling into the narrator voice, the rhythmic narrator voice. And so I paused, and this person's not only an engineer, they're also a director. And I was like, do I have a narrator voice? And they were like, well, since you asked. And I was like, oh, uh-oh. And they gave me the great direction of, they were like, it sounds like you're narrating more for the QC than you are the listener.
Ooh.
And that was profound. I was like, oh, she's like, you're just being very careful with your diction and you're pausing in all the right places so they can cut in if there's a breath. And she was like, I think you could let it flow a little more. I think going back to the perfectionism, she was like, I think you could sound a little more casual if you wanted, which was hard because it was a book about day trading, but it was a good way to practice. Like, we were going to be doing the book anyway. So I was like, okay. And the writing was, did have opportunities where it was dense talking about the actual financial instructions, but then there were parts where the author was like chatting with you like over coffee. So that was a great place to practice it. And I had somebody to like hold, it was sort of like spotting and gymnastics. It was like I was practicing it with somebody there live to be like, oh, you veered off. Let's go back to it. And so even though I don't have them present with me every day, that's been something. And also the style that we were talking about with audiobooks that I think similar to commercials, people don't want to hear you with a big commercial voice selling them something. They want to hear you be like, you should really try this KFC. It's delicious. Like, people want a friend talking to them. And so I don't think that naturally comes to me. I think I tend to want to be more of a narrator voicey person. So I am trying to push against that and just as much as possible. Because when you're reading, you're not speaking. So you can't quite sound like you're speaking. You still have a little bit of that reading sound. But when I'm narrating now, I'm actively, along with like looking at the text and making sure I'm present with each word, I'm trying to find a way that I can really just speak to somebody like a person. And I will say, I have gotten more QC notes, like when QC quality control. So when I did a book recently where it was some dialogue, some characters were in the South, and the word them, THEM, sometimes when you're a human and you're talking to someone, you say, oh yeah, I saw him over there. You'd cut off the TH, and I got pickups for it.
I might argue against that if the characters were Southern.
I did. And even if they're not Southern, like, even if we all do that. So after I had that conversation with my friend, I did push back for the exact reasons. I was like, I understand that this is for accuracy, but I think we're starting to actually lose the storytelling element in favor of perfection of diction. And if you, as the publisher, disagree, I will re-record them. But I just thought I should point out, I know the proofer's just doing their job, but I have to push back against this because I think it starts to whittle it away and like takes us closer to AI, which like you can hire an AI to do it instead then. So that's been a thing that I'm actively practicing, is just like making sure I'm not losing the human element of myself. Because again, back to perfectionism, I don't like being told I've done something wrong, and I don't want to be told I've done it wrong twice. So once I've gotten a correction, I really try not to let it happen again. But then it squeezes my creativity out of the booth, because all I can think is, how can I make this perfect? Pickups are a part of the process for a reason. So
Absolutely.
anyway, it's a battle, but it does make the read more fun. Like it does make it, even some books that I don't necessarily connect with as strongly. I love a lot of the stuff I narrate, but sometimes when the character, I might not have a direct access point, like and I have to find it a little bit more. Sam Dez gave this great way to share character voices. We did a book together, and Sam said, listen, she got it from someone else that I can't remember. She said, can you just send me an audio file of you talking like your character? Don't read the dialogue. Just tell me about who your character is, where you're voicing them in your body. Like, do you feel them in the back of your throat, down in your chest, in your head voice? Tell me what you think about them, and just talk like that character for a minute and send me that. Game changer.
So I don't know where Sam got it for sure, but that's how I do character voices and sharing of character files. And I've taught it at different places. So she could have gotten that from me.
Maybe.
Yeah. I love, so when I do character snippets, I will include actual dialogue lines of the character, but this is how I save it for myself. So it's just what I share with other people when I'm doing a multicast. I will then spend 30 to 45 seconds just talking as if I am the character and describing what I'm vocally doing for the character voice in the character voice.
Yes.
As if I'm the character. Yeah.
This is what's so great about Community is like it spreads around. Like I first had this experience with Patrick Zeller. Like I was just narrating with him and this is how he sent. But like, where did he get it from? We'll never know. Did multiple people like explore? But like, yeah, what a brilliant
one. With lots of great ideas in history, there are multiple people who have, that's...
Isn't there a specific word like that was, it's like a science
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know
simultaneous discovery, something like that.
Yeah.
I have to look it up.
I saw a reel of a guy, this will hopefully make sense. He was on a bike and he had a little like salt shaker full of seeds and he was just like riding along his bike and in the empty areas where there was no growth, he was just like shaking the seeds. And I feel like that's what this is somebody just has an idea and they're like shaking the seeds all around the community and then some of them blossom up and we're like, oh, look at this new idea. And we're like, where did it come from? Nobody knows.
Yeah. Oh, such good stuff.
The internet says there's a term is simultaneous discovery.
That sounds about right. Yeah. I know there's a number of scientific discoveries that throughout history that have like two completely independent trains of thought and scientific work and come up with the same idea about the same time.
Elizabeth Gilbert, I think, talks about that in Big Magic.
Oh, she does, yeah.
About an idea floating up and how if you don't snatch it, can keep floating around. It's been a long time since I've read that book, but I just remember that
like she talks about it from like a creative standpoint that sometimes there's simultaneous discovery with like creative ideas for fiction writing and such. Like there's something in the ether.
Yeah.
I wanted to say before we moved on too that something else that struck me about, your commitment to like, oh, sometimes I go into narrator voice. Let me see like how much more I can connect to the listener and really be with that. Is that like our weaknesses, quote unquote, are also our strengths? Because that same thing that I've listened to quite a few of your narrations and enjoyed them so much. I love having Megan in my ear. And the same thing you're talking about is also like there's this gravitas and melody to your voice that are just so compelling. And it's like, so even if you're a narrator-y voice and you're like at your worst and it's getting really patterny, it still has that beautiful gravitas and melody and something special to it. And then it's just a matter of like I feel like from the inside we think, oh my God, it's terrible and I have to make it better, when really like your version of what might feel like it's terrible to you is actually already very good. And you're just playing in a range of like, okay, it's very good, but I'd like to make it truly excellent. So I'll just keep growing. And so that really struck me too, that sometimes something in my work is that I'm naturally very animated. And so, especially earlier on, I would get a lot of feedback of like, it needs to be more nuanced, it needs to be more subtle. And I would be so mad at myself. I'm too much. I try too hard. I work too hard. I can't let this go. But now, right, like it's also a strength because I bring a lot of emotionality and dynamicism to the work. And yes, dynamicism.
Yes, go with it. Go with it.
Dynamicism. And like, yes, my work benefits from being more nuanced and subtle and relaxing and not trying so hard. But the cool part about being dynamic and emotional was always there. So just
and that's a special skill. Like, I think I've recommended you to someone recently because of that special skill. And that's how, when we were talking about your samples, when we were like talking about at one point you were updating your website, and how you label your samples is different from other people for just that reason. And like, it's also, I'm sorry, I'm gushing because I know these things, but there's another thing I really value and share with other people of how you did your reach outs, of coming from that space rather than here are books I've done and accolades I have. And you're like, nope, this is my human self. Here are all my emotions. Get to know me. Hire me. And then they do.
Well, and also that's why people hire us. There's not a book that I've ever gotten that I've gotten because I've won X number of awards or been nominated for X awards or whatever. I get asked to audition because of who I am as a human and because of the personality that I bring to the book. So opening the conversation, yes, might give you a little bit of social proof to talk about awards and nominations, etc. But all it is going to do is give you social proof. It's not going to ever be the reason that you're asked to audition for a specific project. Ever, ever, ever.
Yeah.
I would argue it might help you stay better on produce. Like there are just so many wonderful narrators that like if you have awards and accolades and you did a big book, like you might stick in a producer's mind better. And so they might think of you more often. But no, it's not why they're asking you. It will never be why they're asking you to audition for the book. Agree.
Yeah. But again, before we move on, something else that you said, Megan, that just really struck me that I sort of wanted to pull out was that initial statement of, it sounds like you're narrating for QC, not for the listener. And it made me think, we're referring back to lots of past episodes today, but it made me think of Sarah's and my conversation with Amy Rubinate, because she talked about how I think she was maybe engineering this person, but it was someone who had lots of mouth noise. And normally, if that's happening, like you're going to be giving them feedback like, hey, we need to reduce this mouth noise, etc. And before she gave that feedback, and again, I'm probably misquoting this, but if you want the exact quote, go listen to the episode. But that as she was hearing this, she was realizing that after just a very short period of time, this narrator was so connected to the text that the mouth noise like just completely disappeared from awareness. And that's another example of, if this were a narration for QC, 100% of the focus would be on getting rid of that mouth noise. But the mouth noise didn't matter to the story. And in fact, the narrator was telling the story so well that focusing on the mouth noise would have actually detracted from the performance. And I think that's something important to remember. I'm working on an anthology project with a bunch of narrators right now, and a lot of these narrators are newer narrators, and so they're in this project doing their very first studio approval process. And I'm giving them feedback on things that they need to tweak in their setup. And I'm trying to be really careful as I'm doing this to stress, these are the things to think about and the things to work on, but please don't overdo it. Please let this be something that's maybe just like a 1% in the back of your mind. I'm going to make sure I'm hydrated before I start recording. It's not that this is going to be the end all or be all of you getting jobs. The performance is what matters.
Which sometimes makes me wonder if we're all freelancers, right? Usually we have a publisher, but the publisher usually outsources most of the time to a QC company or an individual and us. And the amount of communication that we have with that person is a single email that says, here's your pickup packet, get it back to us in 48 hours. And then you send it back. And there's no discussion usually about like building the book together, having a collaborative process. And I wonder what it could be like if it was more involved, that we were having a discussion of like, what did you think about this moment? Or like, there's also a lot of debate around pacing. Like sometimes publishers are like, there should only be X amount of seconds between each word. And this, and like, but some books require more breath, more pauses. But because of QC requirements, some things just get cut and lost. And I know we as narrators may be too precious sometimes about things, and folks in QC are like, look, we just got to do the book. So I know there's a fine line, but I wonder if we started having more discussions about, and it's unfortunately just the way the system of the audiobook industry is. There are some companies that have the luxury to do that, but majority don't because it's time and money. But that's something that could be cool, that maybe like you, as you have the power as a producer, you're able to be more intentional with how that happens and have a huge curated process that definitely overall makes a difference in the book. So maybe the way that we make change is doing it individually where we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually thinking that when you were talking about, that the proofer had marked that you didn't say the TH in them. And I was thinking, the system is set up to work against us because the proofer, like maybe they also preferred how you pronounce it, but they don't actually have the
they're worried about not catching all the mistakes.
It's not, they are not, what is the word I'm looking for? Empowered to make that creative decision because that's not their job. And so they're not actually, like, they might think they might, I mean, it depends on the proofer and their perspective and how the producer has talked to the proofer. But in a lot of cases, the proofer just doesn't have that say. And so they might agree with you, but their job is to market. And I actually had this come up in a book where I made up melody to a lyric, and the proofer, like, it's not, they don't have the, what is the word I'm looking for here? Like when you
authority.
Authority, thank you. They don't have the authority. Like, it is a general rule, like, hey, don't sing in an audiobook. There might be legal problems, right? And so the proofer did not have the authority to be like, yeah, but this is an exception because you made up the song and the lyrics are made up, so we're all good. And I felt that, and so it was like, it's just because of how the system is set up that they marked it. And I was like, no, like, this creative decision is actually too important to me. But like, we have to work against the system, like, and have like it's on the narrator's shoulders. And we need to like bring up a dialogue with the proofer, with the producer in a way that's respectful, because it's not the proofer's like fault that, and they might even agree with, and it turned out in this case, this person agreed with the creative decision. It was, it was scary for me because I was like, what if they don't agree, and what if they're upset that I disagree? And I was like, what the fuck? We're collaborators. Let's have a conversation. We're all okay. And it ended up that everybody totally agreed about this creative decision. And including like, okay, so this was for a producer that was working for a publisher. So the producer had to check in with the publisher, and like it was a thing. But when there is a creative decision that's worth having a dialogue around, I think having, what I learned from that is just approaching with like openness and care and collaboration, and being like, oh, hey, I was thinking this, because the proofer is almost never has the authority to do anything subjective about the creative side, even if in their heart they're over there thinking like, oh, but this would be so much better, I should let it be, but that's not my job. Like,
it's like an assembly line. So it's, if we could just take it from a line to a circle.
Yeah,
instead of us like going down from point A to point B, if we're sitting in a circle having a discussion about how to create this project, it makes it so much more rich for everybody involved, I think.
Absolutely. And also, I'm speaking just like how the general system works. I don't want to imply that there are no companies where they're working more collaboratively or gave the QC or more.
There are out there, but they're usually higher budgets or bigger projects, and not the majority of the work out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My hope is that in the age of AI, that the human-voiced audiobooks will move towards that circle paradigm, because that is what will make the human-voiced projects truly valuable and unique and impactful to the listener. There's a very distinct qualitative difference between an AI voiced audiobook and a human voiced audiobook. And also, the wider that we can make that difference, the more that it will serve this art as an art, that it will help our craft form be viewed as an art and not just an assembly line.
And an argument for human proofers and human editors.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because proofers like Eric, who I love, has a brilliant understanding of them versus M, or like I've learned a lot. Eric and I worked a lot together when I first started, and was a wonderful guide in teaching me things as well. Like, yes, accuracy, but like understood the craft and is passionate about the craft makes a difference in my project. And anytime I have an indie project, I'm always hiring Eric because of that reason. And the same with editors. Like, you can hire programs now that can edit things for you or master things for you, but it's the nuance. It's the understanding the human element. It's understanding when that pause is necessary and when it's not. That makes the difference.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. We had a recent conversation, and I'm not remembering which episode it was, but about positron and that same sort of thing, that it is best employed as a tool to help the editors be more creative, because it takes the stress of having to pay attention to every word away and allows them to have the mental capacity to be creative in, like, okay, this pause, the narrator left a little bit too much time, the listener's not going to follow that, versus this pause, it might be long, but that is exactly the amount of time that's needed for this particular moment in the book. And those are creative decisions that we want our proofers and editors to have the mental capacity to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been an incredible discussion, Megan. We are finally at our last question. Well, I say finally. I want this conversation to keep going on, but we are at our last question that all of us are going to take a turn at answering. And it's how we end every episode, asking, what is exciting you about the craft of audiobooks right now, today? And Sarah, I would love for you to go first. What's exciting you today?
Being here with you too. No, that's not my answer, but it is exciting me today.
Yay, friend. Me too.
I am really excited about how audiobooks actually stretch me as a human. And then the more I stretch as a human, the more I can bring to the audiobook craft. And specifically today, I realized oftentimes if there's something that I'm doing, I'm like, I'm kind of suck at this. What's really going on underneath is that there's an element of me that I need to stretch into. So for example, I was like, God, I kind of suck at action scenes. Like, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but I just feel like the action's not coming to life. And I like paused and I was like, what am I resisting? What am I blocking inside myself? And I realized like, oh, I do not enjoy the adrenaline of like action scenes or scary scenes. Like in my body, it can feel overwhelming and like a lot. And so I like was like, oh, okay, like very understandable. But what if like that was all happening subconsciously. And so I brought it into my consciousness and I was like, cool. Like, what if I just kind of work with my body and let my body know it's okay to allow this adrenaline to move through? Will my action scenes get better? And my answer was like, yeah, that was way better. And then I can probably keep, growing my capacity for the adrenaline moving through. And then my action scenes can get even more better. And so I'm really excited about that idea of like, wait, if I feel like I kind of suck at something, is there something deep unconscious inside of myself that I need to expand, like open my heart to as a human that would help this be more, match my vision better? Like, what? That's so cool. I had an acting teacher once actually that did this work he called it stretch work. And he would specifically set up like each actor, like whatever they were blocked in emotionally inside themselves, that's what we would like do improvs around until like just set up improvs that would help the actor expand into that part of themselves until that like block broke free. And I think that probably that work helped inspire this awareness.
That is so cool. Yeah, I actually just this morning before our interview was having a conversation with Catherine Littrell about how much our body is involved when we are narrating. That kind of like you were saying at the beginning, Megan, that yes, we may be sitting or standing or wherever, and our eyes are focused one place, and our microphone is physically not moving, so we need to stay in the sweet spot of the mic, so like we can't be moving around too much. And yet our bodies are part of the work that we do. And I love, Sarah, that you were identifying that you needed to open up physically to allow those hormones that are coming through you, not because of what you are experiencing, but because of what the characters are experiencing. And when we act, we are experiencing what the characters do. And so cool. Yeah. The mind and body and voice all connected.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Which that's so, it's so human. AI can't do it. We're doing it.
Right. That's right. AI will never have adrenaline.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, right.
Jennifer, what's exciting you today?
Sure. So a lot of times for these answers, I get like really big and broad. And today my answer is something very tiny and technical and specific. What I am like really thinking about and noticing deeply especially the book I'm prepping at the moment, is word repetition. So sometimes when we get a text that's got repeated words, it's like you can kind of tell by reading it's not intentional, that the author or the copy editor just like didn't catch that this word is repeated a whole bunch. And they're not necessarily typos, but like they're kind of annoying and ick. And that's not the sort of repetition I'm talking about. I'm referring to a text where there's an intentional repetition of a word or phrase to really drive home a point or to communicate something that's, very meaningful and intentional on the part of the author. And the book that I'm prepping right now is a nonfiction title that I'll be recording in a couple weeks. There is a passage about civil resistance and fighting against unjust systems. And the author repeatedly uses various forms of the word obedience. There's like a 3-page section where obedience, obey, disobedience, like over and over, almost every sentence in this 3-page portion has some form of the word obedience/disobedience. So on a technical level, I've been really thinking about how I want to perform this passage so that the word doesn't lose its power. I mean, sometimes when you say exactly the same word over and over again, it kind of numbs the ear to it and it like ceases to be a word almost. So I'm thinking about how do I go through this passage so that obedience or disobedience doesn't fade into the background. But I also don't want to hit the word so differently every time that the listener doesn't clock that there is word repetition happening and that it is very intentional and very meaningful. And so, yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about how hearing the same word multiple times can be incredibly powerful. And I've been digging into how I can communicate that through line of word repetition to the listener in a way that doesn't tire the ear. I'm not sure that I've landed on exactly how I'm going to perform this passage quite yet. Like, I think it needs a little bit more rumination in my psyche and my body before I truly settle on it. But yeah, repetition is powerful.
That's exciting. I was like on the edge of my seat because I'm like, what is this craft point going to be? And what are you sharing? And because we haven't talked about this one, it's exciting.
So I did take it to a workshop with Jessie Bickford, and we went over that portion. And one of the things that she suggested is just to make sure as I'm performing it that I am very intellectually aware of each instance, and that I'm not trying to do anything different or separate, but just that intellectually I, as the narrator, am clocking them, and that subtle intellectual awareness will communicate itself in some, je ne sais quoi kind of way to the listener, that just being aware of it is enough to show up in my voice. And again, that's the whole mind-body-voice connection, that even if I'm not sure exactly technically what I'm doing, the awareness of it will come through in my voice. So that's where I'm playing with at the moment. Like I said, I'm not recording this for a couple of weeks yet. The manuscript actually got delayed. So I can't record it for a couple of weeks. It was scheduled initially to record it a little sooner. But I'm going to be playing with this passage because it's a really central one to the point of the book, and I want to make sure that I do it justice.
I feel too, as I hear this unfold, that sometimes the value is in the exploration and asking the questions. Like maybe you won't have the perfect answer by the time you
Yeah.
record the book, but we're pioneers and explorers, and like that in and of itself has value. And maybe 10 years from now you'll be like, oh, I know exactly how to do that.
Or
But
even I'll know exactly how to describe in technical terms what I did. Whereas
right.
what I'm sort of planning at the moment is very like woo-woo, and I'm going to think about it and it'll just magically show up in the technique that I'm using. And I don't know that I can put into words what technique I'm going to use, but maybe I'll be able to do that later. But right now I'm just relying on, again, I haven't actually done it yet, but right now I'm thinking that I'm going to just rely on that mind focal
Yeah.
communication.
And then your awareness of what that was will continue to hone itself as you
Yeah.
continue to discover.
For sure.
I love this podcast.
Me too. All right. So, Megan, it is your turn. What is exciting to you about the craft of audiobooks today?
I don't know if I'm going to be my answer will be slightly different than maybe the actual craft of itself.
That's
but
okay.
So with with the clients that I coach, there can be a thing. I've been narrating since 2016, which now I feel like I have a long gray beard. It's not actually that long, but I do think after a certain period of time when you've been doing something, you get into routines, you get into habits, you get into states of mind of this is how we do it, as I talked about earlier. And the thing I love the most right now is when I'm working with people who are starting out in their journey, actually also people who are at the same place in their journey or a little bit ahead of me, of people who have been, I have a small coaching cohort right now called the Narrator Nook. And the wonderful thing about it is there's a blend of people from, someone who has 2 books to someone who has 200 books. And there's something to be learned from everyone in there. So what I'm liking is knowing that even though I am the person that someone is coming to as an expert, quote unquote, I'm also learning from my coaching clients not to think that there's only one way to do something. There was like an example of someone who I started working with early in my coaching who was like, oh yeah, I've gotten my first 3 books from the major big 5. And I was like, what? How did you do that? And they're like, oh, I just had relationships with the authors and I asked them if I could audition. What? It was like, that's not the way it's done. I just had this like amazing crack open of like, yeah, it's not how it's done that you know of, but it worked for them. So it is how it's done. And so that's one example, but there's also other examples of like, oh, well, can't you do it this way? And having to question my previous beliefs about something in all aspects, in business, marketing, and performance. It's just being flexible and having beginner's mind. Like in yoga, that's something that you always, even if you've been doing something for a long time, you approach it with the eyes of starting fresh and new, and if you would do something differently. So that's something a byproduct I did not expect with coaching people was that I would learn things from them and that it actually helps me serve other people better as I'm going. Because and also like different ways that our brains work, like neurospicy people. I have a lot of clients who are neurospicy, and that I am not. I have a very high executive function. So that's really helpful because it's like, hey, people's brains don't work like yours, so you have to think of different ways to do stuff. One way does not fit all. The thing that matters the most is that the individual has a system that works around them, not you squishing them into a system that was never made for them. So that's, I guess, I'm just trying to be more limber and flexible with maybe there's another way. There's I watched Moana 2 with my niece, and there's like, I don't know the character, but she's like the bat lady. And there's the song that she sings that she's like, there's always another way in. And so I think about it like that. There's, you don't always have to go out the door. There's the window. So that's what I think I'm excited about, is challenging my pre-existing beliefs and if there's something I can do differently.
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Megan. I can very deeply relate to the learning more about yourself through teaching and coaching and working with others. And I come from a background of teaching. I've been teaching music since I was 15, and I stopped when I started narrating audiobooks, and I was just doing the audiobook performance. And I found that I really missed that. And there was a level of richness to my own practice that is improved by coaching and working with others. And I just very deeply relate to that on a coach to coach level.
Well, and I might be a coach, but I came to your amazing workshop during APAC.
Mm-hmm.
So many profound nuggets from there of thinking of things differently. You and your lovely husband, Arturo, gave this presentation actually about AI and how we can think about it differently. And I will not do it justice, but and maybe you're going to save it for sharing I don't want to give it away.
No, go for it.
There was this great discussion about looking at farming as an example of how it has started and how it has evolved with technology and how it has not disappeared. It has just changed. And people who change with it and evolve with it, that's how a practice and a craft survives. And I had never thought about it that way. And if I had something I'm loving seeing is there's lots of new coaches popping up right now.
Yeah.
But if we cannot look at that as scarcity, if we can look at that as abundance and collaborating together and looking at what does that person have to teach that I don't know? And how can I how can we learn together? Or how can I say, I'm not an expert at that, but you know who is? This person. Go see Jennifer. That's something I'm also excited about is how can we not only learn from our clients and other narrators and other coaches, but how can we, the craft only lifts if we're all learning and there's abundance for everyone.
100%.
I also believe that's how we heal the world and trauma is through connection and collaboration and curiosity and openness. And I think a lot of trauma gets created by humans creating systems that only fit for a certain number of humans and excluding all the other humans from that. Not the sole way, but a key way that trauma gets created in the first place.
And last thought, I could be here all night, all day. Something, Sarah, you and I talk about often that you're like, oh, I didn't know that I have a ripple effect. You and I will have these deep conversations about life and these nuggets that will come out of it because you do a lot of work on your internal self and you have this great curiosity of always, like you just talked about it just now, of, wait, what's this part of me? You aren't afraid of it. You examine it, you face it, you take it apart and put it back together. And I take these nuggets and wisdom from you. So maybe it's not just like professional coaches. It's like looking at the other people in my life who are teaching me things about my internal work, circling back to us, like talking kinder to ourselves in the booth. That might seem a little woo or a little like go do that in therapy. But it's like, well, we're emotional creators. And that is how, if we aren't clearing things out, we aren't able to show up as fully as we need to. So many times we'll have these nuggets, you and I, and then I'll go into my other conversations. I'll be, guys, this nugget that my friend shared. And I just share it with them. And these people will have never met you. Maybe they will someday. But the ripple effect that one person can have is amazing if we're open enough to sharing those things and not holding them in or, it's the
hoarding them,
hoarding these discoveries. Or it's like the little, I was talking about the shaking of the seeds. It doesn't matter who planted the seeds necessarily. It's that everyone is enjoying the flowers that are popping up from it.
Such a beautiful community. I love that the audiobook space is this kind of collaborative, we all give and receive with openness together. And I think the more intentionally we keep that character to our community, the more longevity we as artists will be able to have in the shifting technological landscape.
I want to say something that's a little bit edgy around because a lot, it's been repeated by many guests, and I hear very often how special the collaboration in our community is, and I completely agree. And I think it's a spectrum, and it is special and collaborative. It's so much more special and collaborative than some other industries, definitely than other acting industries. But that doesn't mean that there aren't exclusions and hoardings and, people's trauma responses coming up. And I wanted to say that too, because like we can be pioneers in collaboration and care and seed watering as well. Because I would just hate if somebody's ever listening and they go like, I didn't feel that way. Like I went to APAC and I felt really excluded in this moment or by this person or, like that, like, yeah, because we're all healing and it's a work in progress and it's a spectrum and it's everything. And I feel like that is part of the healing, is to acknowledge like the full like imperfect and beautiful picture.
If I can share,
Please.
and you can cut this out if you don't want to. Sarah, you told me, so we had this awesome thing we discovered during APAC, you and I. We didn't get to see each other as much, but then we did this asynchronous communication on this app where we could just like share with what was going on with each other of like a stressful moment that we had, and we could live process it. And it was this beautiful thing. And one thing that you told me was like you had like a weird interaction with someone like the day before, and you were like, that felt weird. And then you actually decided to go acknowledge it with that person and say, hey, I thought this was weird. Did you feel like it was? And this is a beautiful thing that you have told me in life. You open the door. You make the invitation for someone to come have the conversation with you, and then it's their choice if they want to walk through it or not. And like, regardless of how that person responded, like that was a way for you to create the inclusion that you're looking for, of saying, hey, I want to create a dialogue around things we don't really talk about. We're like, oh, that was weird. I guess I'll just move on. But because you talked about it, because we actively did a dialogue over things that were tough during a big event like that, where you have to show up and be present and like be your best self and get all the jobs. We had somebody to live process that with. I had such a better experience because I dealt with it in the moment and I recognized what was happening. And I was like, oh, we can actually address this right now. And it created more ease, calm, and inclusion.
Yeah. And having that anchor, right? Like I had you and, as this safe space, this deep trusted space that made it safer for my body to go into this other space that like maybe wasn't safe. I don't know this person that I had this interaction that fell off. I have no idea how they're going to respond if I bring it up. Maybe they're going to be abusive about it. Like I don't freaking know. But I felt safe and okay to do that because I was okay no matter how they responded, because there were these other safe spaces that I had nurtured and created that supported the like expansion, like how much can we expand this safe space? I don't know. This feels like a really rich and important conversation. I'm not sure how it directly relates to the craft, but
so I've got a little connector, which is a phrase that you used, Megan, talking about what Sarah told you. So I don't know who said it, but the phrase was create the inclusion that you want to experience. And Sarah, you were talking about the audiobook industry being much more inclusive and open and welcoming than many creative spaces. But that doesn't mean it's always that way. And I think it is imperative upon each of us as members of the audiobook community to create the inclusion that we want to experience. And so that does involve things maybe like what you were saying, Megan, earlier about pushing back when the proofer is asking you something that isn't serving the story, and opening the dialogue to allow a circle shape of creativity among everyone involved rather than it being an assembly line. Because there's a way to push back on that would just be like, no, absolutely not. I'm not recording this. There's another way of, I would love to have a conversation around this editorial decision. I want to create the inclusion I would like to experience. And if I want this to be a collaborative process, then that starts with me. And yes, some of that is changing systems, and it's not easy to change systems. But that inclusivity can start with me. So it does relate to the craft. See?
Which then leads back to your passage that you're going to be narrating
sure.
soon about obedience and disobedience.
Mm-hmm.
And though a system may be set up in a certain way, sometimes the best way we can show up for positive change is to disobey the system.
Absolutely.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. Yeah. Boom.
Circles back.
Oh, all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Megan, this has been a truly delightful and meaty and rich conversation. Thank you for sharing your time with us today and for being here.
The gift is to me. What a treat to have this in the middle of my day. And thank you for asking me to be here with you. I love sharing this space.
Yeah, we're so glad that you joined us today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Crafting Audiobooks. We've been your hosts, Jennifer Jill Araya
And Sarah Beth Goer.
wishing you happy audiobook listening and/or crafting.
Bye for now.